This is what I call the genius of swapping. I make myself say the only way I'm going to add something else onto my tabletop is to take something off my tabletop. And usually the only way that happens is for somebody to learn the hard words of no or not now.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, legal, or investment advice. Please consult a professional advisor before making decisions based on what you hear on this show. Welcome to that Wall Street Tribe. Excited to introduce to you Mr. Steve Graves. Steve, glad to have you.
Hey guys, thanks so much for letting me join you today. Happy to be with you.
Yeah, well, Tribe, we get a chance to pick the brain of an expert here, and one of our good friends, Sharon Srivatsa, says, never reach out to somebody and say, I want to pick your brain. But in the podcast world, right, like we actually can do that. We have a chance to ask questions, and Steve is willing to come and freely give. Steve, your person listening to you right now is driving down the road, probably on the way to the gym, maybe between jobs. Job sites, or maybe they have a patient they're waiting on, and they're looking for a way to free themselves up. And you have a chance to speak in the lives of so many different entrepreneurs. What do you think is the most practical thing you and I could talk about, and Joey could talk about today, that would help this individual? Great
question. I think a lot of it depends on what kind of world somebody's really trying to chase. At the end of the day, like we all are chasing some version of a engineered world that creates, it either has this kind of balance or this kind of economic outputs, or I've got this kind of wealth that allows me to do these kinds of things. I'm a huge believer in designing a life that's the best version of yourself now, to the best of your ability. Now, I'm not saying that you don't work hard for tomorrow, but like if their full vision is on, what life's going to look like 10 years from now, they're going to miss a whole lot of living between now and then. And so I'm a huge believer, all the CEOs and business owners that I work with, it's not that we don't have a vision. We do. I've got a buddy, I'm flying to Austin tomorrow, and I'm going to visit with a buddy that's just taking the second company public. And so he obviously understands long-term vision, but if you want more time with your kids in this season of life, design it that way. If you figure out that you need to over-index toward your physical health, design it that way. And I'm a huge believer, one more thing, I'm a huge believer what I call the composite scorecard of life. But that's what I think people of coherent, faith journeys, that's what I think people should be chasing. Anybody can index on one thing. The question is can I really juggle all the balls and wear all the hats that the demands of life call me to do in this season of life? Because that's the test of my leadership. The test of my leadership is what am I doing and knowing at this season of life. So I stretch life into seasons and say, design and engineer for that season, if that makes any sense.
If you've listened to our show for any length of time, you've heard us talk about infinite banking and how we were able to use that concept to create over $50,000 a month in passive income. But it's just not that easy to figure out, how does this all connect into my own personal system?
Stallion, that's why we created the passive income operating system, bro. It shows you how to turn active income into passive income. It makes all the steps come together. If you would like to get access to it as a podcast listener, we've never given this away in public before, go to what'swhatwallstreet.com/PIOS.
What we consistently hear from the people that are engaging with our coaching is that they want more time, right? They want more time, and they're looking for something that's alternative to what they've always done with money to buy back some of that time in their life, whether they own their own business or whether they're just a highly paid professional, whatever it may be. In your experience, maybe speak from a personal time where you saw that you took advantage and engineered your life, as you say, to create that, or one of the coaching clients that you've worked with, how they then put those things in place for their life.
Yeah, well, most of time constraints of life from my world, they come back to what I call the capacity table. We all have a capacity table, and not everybody's table is the same dimensions. I happen to be a real high capacity, multitasking individual. Uh, my wife is not. She has a much smaller tabletop. It's her wiring. It's just the way God made her. And so no matter what size your table is, we all start stacking stuff on the table. Everything in our world, we stack it up until we can't stack anymore. And then what we start doing is we then start swapping, whatever. But we don't do that. People don't change unless there's some sense of weight and urgency that makes them change. Otherwise, we're just going to keep repeating year after year and just become an older version of the same person we were 10 years ago, as a general rule. And I'm not trying to be a skeptic. I'm just saying, generally, people don't generally change at their deepest wiring. And so the capacity tabletop it's the discipline for somebody to reach to the level that they say, I can't get anything else on the table. So then what I have to do is I have to then do a couple, 2 or 3 things. And this is what I call the genius of swapping. And I make myself say the only way I'm going to add something else onto my tabletop is to take something off my tabletop. And usually the only way that happens is for somebody to learn the hard words of no or not now. And if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a people pleaser, if you're an idea person, if you're a visionary, those are words that probably you might not be as skilled and disciplined in being able to say no or not now. And so that's what people who have time constraints, they're their own problem. It's not usually the stuff around them. It's the way that they have the inability to either say no or not now, or to practice what I call swap. So for example, when my kids were younger, I loved to fly fish. You're not going to meet a person on the planet that loves to fly fish more than me. And I love it. And I fly fish all the time, everywhere. Well, when my kids were littler, guess what? I was wondering if I needed to rent out my fly gear, or give it away or something. Because I wasn't doing that. And so there's no way that I could be as focused with my kids, also as focused with my hobby, also as focused with my work, also as focused with my family, also focused with my aging mom. You can't do it all. And it doesn't come down to simply dividing life into equal 10%, 10%, 10%. That's not real world. Anybody who has more than one kid knows that's true, because not all of your 3 kids need equal response from you on any given day. You're always letting, that's the flow concept that a lot of people have read about. You're flowing your energy and your resources to who might need it at that moment. So for me, time constraints, Joey, is usually a capacity issue, and capacity is about it's a math problem. Capacity is a literal tabletop that I can be as creative as I can, but eventually I will reach my max of things I can stack on my tabletop. Let me give you an example.
Hold up, Steve. Let's stop you there for a second.
Yeah.
You already threw out the fighting words by saying maybe that this is an idea guy that has trouble with this, like stacking too much on his tabletop. By the way, my tabletop is much smaller than the idea guy's. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, he keeps getting he gets bringing in more lumber to build a big table.
I got a tabletop for the Last Supper. Joey's got one for one supper.
That's perfect. That's perfect. You got the group, you got the community tabletop. Yeah.
I want to shift gears a little bit for you though. When we were talking ahead of time, you were mentioning, because I want to kind of dial into the entrepreneur. These are the types of people that you're dealing with all the time. Anyway, I want to get your expertise on this. It seems to me that there are certain entrepreneurs that have more of an affinity to be able to get to this financial freedom, to get to the more time possibility than others. And you've been able to study these types for a long period of time. How would you break them down? Like, give us some frameworks of how entrepreneurs typically might have that better affinity or not.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple of things. Most founders, there's different kinds of people. There's people who are really wired for launching businesses. It's what I call launch the business leader. And then the people who are run the business leaders, they're really wired to run the businesses. There are other people that are really wired to change businesses, to turn them around, to resuscitate them, to renovate them, whatever. Those are natural wirings of people. Like, that doesn't mean I can't do them. Or like, there are people that, like, take somebody who's a natural launch the business leader. As a general rule, launch the business leaders are incredible at 0 to 1. If it wasn't for them, nothing would ever get up off the ground. The problem is the same wiring that it takes, intense personalization, intense preferences that are really what the founder wants. If the founder loves to eat hamburgers, guess what everybody's eating every day? You're eating hamburger, whatever, and so, but that same wiring can really fall short when a business tries to scale. And so the same person that it takes to get something off the ground might not be the same person that can actually scale it. Now, here's the reason this is important is because a buddy of mine years and years ago shared with me a pyramid, and there's a pyramid on personal wealth building that I believe wholesale. I bought hook, line, and sinker. I bought it. Okay. And wealth building is a pyramid. The bottom layer is labor. The middle layer is knowledge. The top layer is risk. Okay. Labor is where I exchange my muscles, my time for some dollar. Now, if I'm a heart surgeon, I'm getting a lot bigger exchange than I am if I'm flipping burgers at the, but it's still a labor exchange. It's a 1-to-1. And guess what? I've yet to meet I've yet to meet a smart heart surgeon who could be performing 3 heart surgeries at the same time with his 2 hands. Not happening. Now, they'll figure out all kind of ways to make money around it, but like, it's a labor exchange. The next step up is knowledge exchange, where somebody learns to trade their knowledge for money. Now, usually that goes from a 1x or 2x to a multiple. It's a 3x, 4x, okay? But then you get to the highest of the pyramid, and that's where you take a risk. You risk your time, your money, and you might get a lot back. You might not get any back. I've done a bunch of venture investing in my lifetime. We have a venture fund I'm the chairman of. We do a bunch of stuff. But you're not going to ever be in that space without taking risk. So if somebody says, I just don't want to ever take any risk, then they're going to be suspended down here in the labor, which means if they want to make more money to buy more time back, they better be finding something that the exchange rate is going to be a high exchange rate. It can't be a $3 an hour exchange rate. And so a lot of that, your question about, the question of being an entrepreneur, entrepreneurs are awesome. If it wasn't for entrepreneurs, there would never be anything off the ground. Entrepreneurs they launch stuff, it's going from concept through launch, prove, and scale. You can't scale what's not been launched. There's no such thing. You got to have something's got to be off the ground to scale it. So entrepreneurs get stuff off the ground, but entrepreneurs might or might not be naturally wired to scale. And that becomes part of the problem is they're not necessarily interested in redesigning the enterprise for scale because, you guys have heard this. It's the old hub and spoke. The structure is completely around the performance of the entrepreneur. That's really, really hard to scale. Now, it might throw off enough money if you're a heart surgeon because you don't need to scale. The numbers are big enough, but if you're down here, I just literally met the guy that does our Christmas lights. We're about to hire him in one of the other businesses that I'm a passive owner in. And he said, did you know I do your Christmas lights? And I said, not really. And he said, you and your wife, your wife's talked to me a bunch of times. Are you satisfied? And I said, absolutely. Love it. Love it. Well, the reason he can scale that is because it's not tied to him. He's got a bunch of workers out there, if that makes any sense. But entrepreneurs, I'm pro entrepreneur. I'm hugely bullish on entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs they've got to make sure that they have a realistic understanding of where their weak sides, their blind spots, from a structural standpoint. This is not just a wiring and what's your Enneagram number and you got the wrong one. This is a structure thing. If you're over the top at sales, but you're horrible at finance, you better get somebody in there that's finance. If you're awesome at finance, but you don't know how to really grow the top line, you got to get you somebody in there that loves to eat lunches and loves to, cast the vision and hook new fish on the line.
I want to ask you, since you're kind of diving into this, and I know that kind of in our prior discussion, you talked about there's 3 different types of entrepreneurs. There's kings, there's riches, and famous. I think I said that right. Kings, rich, and famous. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Why is it critical for our audience member to know which one they are.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, we're assigning founder and entrepreneur to be the same person, but King, Rich, and Famous primarily are a founder. Not all entrepreneurs are founders. A lot of entrepreneurs join with entrepreneurial spirit. Being an entrepreneur is more about the risk profile as a general rule often. But founders are literally people who go from nothing to something. Founders, as a general rule, my experience has been, and this is taken off of a pretty significant academic book written years ago, where the original idea was being rich or king. I added the concept of famous. Founders, generally speaking, I would say founders have a natural proclivity to either be king, rich, or famous. King is high control. Very little happens without their touch. They know all the details that's going on. Everything touches back to them. Somebody who wants to be rich is usually somebody who's willing to be a little looser with details and accuracy, perhaps, and because they want to scale. They're all about making money, and they're not about driving down every little P&L where we can find every penny. They're very energized by top line growth, and top line growth will often allow them in their own minds to let's let the bottom line will find itself if you give me enough top line growth. Famous is the last one, and don't think Taylor Swift famous. It's not that. It's somebody who wants to be known for something. They really want to be known for transforming an idea or starting a concept or innovating something with a stuck industry or, providing a cause or a common good to something that's not taking place. So one of those three is the internal battery pack tied to the brain, tied to the soul of a founder, I think. You can look at the story of McDonald's, or you can watch the documentary on the founders, and it literally will lay this out. The McDonald brothers were kings. They were kings. They got to a place that if they couldn't control making sure every hamburger had 3 dollops of mustard or wherever it was, they wanted to shut the whole restaurant down, stop serving any burgers, because we must have 100%, every burger. Along comes Ray Kroc and he says, "What are you talking about, man? Let's try to get 10,000 burgers out a week. Let's just kick them out. And if one burger only has 2 dollops, they'll live and they'll probably come back. They'll be fine." And a king is they're just dying, because a king is like, you violated the very integrity of everything that we're building. And it's a wiring thing, so king, rich, and famous are the natural proclivities of a founder. And the reason that's important, Russ, is because, again, kings are very common for the get it off the ground stage of life. If it wasn't for a king, kings they know how to just grind it through and get it off the ground, get it done, But when it comes time to scale, often, more times than not, a king has to either find a partner or find a solid person to join them in the journey that they're motivated by rich, or famous, because either one of those can actually be fuel to a upside growth curve that makes way more sense than maybe the king does.
There was nothing worse than walking into class when you're in school and the teacher saying, "Pop quiz day." Why? Because you were unprepared. Are you unprepared, though, for financial freedom?
Don't be. Find out how close you are by taking our 30-second quiz at wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/quiz.
Hey, as a fan of our podcast, chances are you're always looking for other great resources to grow your wealth and build financial freedom.
And if you've ever been curious about self-storage investing, there's only one guy you need to listen to, our good friend, Scott Myers.
Yeah, Scott is the OG of self-storage. He's been in the game for years, and his podcast, Self-Storage Investing, is packed with insights, strategies, and real-world success stories.
Whether you're just getting started or you're looking to scale, Scott's podcast will help you understand why self-storage is one of the most recession-resistant cash-flowing assets out there.
Yeah, go check out Self-Storage Investing with Scott Myers. Wherever you listen to podcasts, trust us, you'll be hooked.
Can you kind of practically apply this to, I know that you are coaching a lot of different founders through this process. Can you maybe give me an example? Ray Kroc was a great one. I just watched that founder movie for the 10th time recently, but maybe one, obviously I've used names, but just industry, something that was more relatable. Many of us don't have the largest real estate portfolio in the world like McDonald's does, or provide the most toys on a daily basis like McDonald's does. So we may not connect as well. Give me one of a founder you're talking to that maybe was either a king or was rich and needed that other person to help them along the way.
Yeah. So I was just talking to one of my partner coaches, a younger guy here a couple of days ago, and he's got a person in his portfolio. He's got a founder who's started a company, and they're in the construction related space, and they've made pretty good money. They're all doing well, but they happen to be in a market that's just exploding. And the question becomes is to what degree this person is going to ride the speed of that market. I wrote a book called The 5 Tasks. That's a whole nother conversation. But I do believe that leaders have to figure out, you don't set the speed of your market. You set the speed that you're going to relate to the speed of the market. So if you're a construction guy and you're in a market that's just building faster than you could build, you got to answer, what risk am I willing to take to hire new people, to buy more equipment, to stay up with the growth rate? Now a king is going to be very wary of hiring people that they don't know really well. They don't really have deep connections with. I've got to qualify all the nuancing, and so guess what? He's had a really hard time hiring any real significant higher level leaders. I mean, you can always hire lower worker bees because they're just give me them a paycheck and they're going to do the task. But when you really are asking somebody to be both a thinker and a doer, not just a doer, but a thinker and a doer in your business enterprise, you got to take a risk with somebody perhaps. And so this particular person, this particular guy that owns this company, he struck out the last 3 people he's tried to hire. And he struck out because, from my estimation, he's trying to just hire a replacement of himself. He's just trying to hire another person that just is a younger version of just himself. What he really needs is he needs a complementary partner. He needs somebody that like if he can do these skill sets, somebody else needs to be naturally wired to do these skill sets because the organization needs both of them now. And so he's having to kind of adjust what his hiring profile is to hire for a different person. Now, Russ, to stay on the topic, that's not comfortable for somebody who's a king because they're hiring out of their mindset. Like they're hiring somebody who's wired completely different. Be like asking an accountant to go hire a sales manager. Like how in the world is that going to work? Not easy.
In order for it to be complementary, it has to be different. And that's the part that's yet to. So this is really interesting as business owners listening to you, they're trying to solve this for themselves and thinking, well, how can I find a person like that? What are some like best practices that you have helped these other founders that you've coached do exactly what you're talking about?
Yeah. Good question, Joey. One of the first things you got to ask in small to medium-sized businesses is, are you hiring to really just simply execute and do? Or are you really trying to hire somebody who's bringing a capability set like the ones we just talked about? They really are bringing some strategic thinking, some executive thinking, some leadership thinking, not just leadership doing. Are you really trying to are you trying to build out your capability set for something? And if you are, then you have to, as a general rule, I've used for decades a little best practice in hiring, and it really has never let me down in hiring. Number one, always literally have a very clear and compelling job description or role profile. Number one. Number two, have an objective process to interview candidates and talk to candidates about that profile. Objective, not just go with your gut. Number three, have multiple candidates that really can do the role before you make a decision. And then number four, have an objective process to select the candidates. Entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders are usually the worst in violating that. They go with their gut. They only have one candidate. It's Uncle Susie's. It's Uncle Bobby's first cousin Susie would be perfect. She's moving back here to Auburn. She's a grad. I know she'd be perfect for the job, and that's fine. She might win the role, but put the role into a process, because that's the risk you're taking with talent. See, all organizations are either behind the talent curve or ahead of the talent curve relative to their flywheel and their business engine.
Yep.
Like your business engine is not up for grabs. It's not up for discussion. Either you have it, either your flywheel's cranking, or you're still back here trying to push your flywheel and just like gut it up and get it going. And so if you got your flywheel going, you better have some talent that's running with that flywheel. And that's where you gotta be able to hire talent. And by the way, guess what? Hiring takes risk. When my very first business partner and I, 30 years ago, started one of our first companies, we had at the end of the year a Christmas bonus. It was not much. We decided we were going to enjoy the bounty of our hard work that year, or we were going to scale our business. We decided we were going to hire a certain person that would allow us to literally begin the scale process, because we wanted to design to scale. Now, guess what? We didn't each get a check that we would have gotten, but what we did is we got an engineered building model that reap benefits the next year for us.
So I want to ask a couple of quick questions. I know we're running out of time here, but you spurred some more thought, which is rare, by the way. Joey's usually the thought guy. I'm the just talk guy. But you said that you were talking earlier about the pyramid with labor at the bottom, knowledge in the middle, I think, and risk at the top.
Yeah.
And now you start talking about as entrepreneur founders, where as we try to scale, we start looking for executive level people, ultimately people that can help move us out of the doing seat to more of the S quadrant to the B quadrant.
Yeah.
And I wonder, like, as you were saying that, should we, as we are doing that, sometimes I feel like we hire executive level people who probably are more in that labor quadrant. Is that a common mistake that we start hiring these executive people in our businesses that are more labor than they are knowledge, so that they don't have the capacity, as you said, to think what are other ways? Because if you as the founder are the only one able to think and only one able to create, then you will be limited by your ability to execute and communicate that message to the people at the labor field. Am I catching that right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you got it, man. I think you're absolutely dead on. Couldn't agree more. So in the world that I live in, I break it down. Everybody is either a performer contributor or a manager contributor. Every role and every function, either you're a performer contributor, and performer contributors drive outputs and outcomes through their skill sets. I'm a surgeon, I'm a preacher, I'm a pastor, I'm a musician, I'm a dentist, just name them. I'm a plumber, I'm a construction guy. That's a performer contributor. I'm doing my performance. I'm contributing through my performance, and the compensation model pays me for my performance. Okay. A manager contributor drives outputs through other performers, through other people's skill sets. Often small to medium-sized businesses, among their biggest, hardest hires is finding someone who's naturally wired to be a manager contributor. Because, by the way, manager contributors look like they're not doing anything. They don't look like they're just the conductor of the orchestra. They're not playing an instrument. They're not in front of a microphone. All we do is see their back. Like in an orchestra, we don't even see the guy's face. We see the guy's back. It's everybody else's face that we see. And so, but if the labor thing is where it's the easiest for us to figure out somebody's real value. Oh man, you're doing $100,000 of sales in that market. I bet you could bring that over here and do $100,000 worth of sales over here. That's the labor exchange. But what you eventually have to have with any scaling enterprise is somebody who understands, and they're wired for manager contributor, and if you have that, then you really are on the model for scaling. We've got a bunch of businesses in Northwest Arkansas where I live. Seven Brews, a coffee group, Slim's Chickens is another one. These are just local groups that are just scaling like hundreds and hundreds of outputs. I mean, and guess what they've had to hire? They've had to hire manager contributors.
Yeah.
You got it.
All right. One last question, and just the practical. You also talked about the mistake that the founder entrepreneur makes is they're trying to assess, bring in on this talent, that they'll use their gut. Joey and I have done that. You also said that they don't have an objective tool that they're using to make these decisions to evaluate talent. What's one of those tools that you love to use that helps be objective and not subjective when you're evaluating that talent?
Yeah. So the first objective tool is to make sure you have a clear, concise, compelling job description. It's amazing how many times entrepreneurs are trying to hire and they will move around. Right this second, there's a hiring going on in the conference room behind me with a person that one of the founders of a business that I'm part owner in. And I promise you, because he's an entrepreneur and he's a really emotional leader, he's an awesome person, but he has to stay on script and read verbatim. This is what we're hiring, because he will make up that job, will move around a million times on what it is they're hiring. And they want to hire against the potential of the talent. You don't do that. If you're engineering a D1 football program to win, you're looking for a tight end who looks like this, and they can play in this kind of scheme, and they can do this kind of blocking. I mean, you have to have a job that's objective. The second big objective, a quick takeaway, is make sure you have other people other than you scoring candidates. Have a process that other people weigh in. And you say, well, there's nobody else. Call some friends. You don't have to have a board. You don't have to have employees. Call 3 friends and say, hey, man, I'm trying to hire a sales director, and I just need at least 2 other sets of eyes and 2 other voices and brains on this. If I give you a Chick-fil-A coupon for a sandwich and a drink, would you have a meal with this guy? And let me tell you what I'm hiring. And then you just do your best. You know me really well, and you know my business. You go and talk to them, and you come back and say, do you think that person can do that job here? Did they do it, down the street? I know they did it down the street. That's what their resume says. The question, can they do it here now with me? So that's another objective thing you could pull out.
Steve, I feel like Russ just got a lot of free coaching. And by the way, I'm grateful because he needs it. He needs all the help.
Sure.
Good.
Joey, we'll send an invoice. We'll send an invoice your way. And I just do your best to try to make it work and let it live out for long.
But man, it's obvious you have tons of wisdom to share with the founders that you're helping. For those who've been listening and want to connect, we've set up a site here, wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/cornerstone. So if you want to connect with Steve, go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/cornerstone. Steve, it was amazing to have you on the show today. Appreciate your time.
Happy you do it, Gus. Thanks for letting me be with you. Love what you're doing.
Thank you, Steve.
All right.
And Tribe, if you found value today, please rate and review the show. Share it with one of your friends who is drowning at his business and needs help that Steve has been talking about today, so that he or she can get out of the rat race and on to freedom. As always, we'll catch you on the next episode.
This has been the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show to break free of the Wall Street mindset and begin building wealth on your own terms in places you understand, so that your wealth will never run dry. See you next episode.